Hello! Welcome back to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast, where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay. With me, as always, is Amanda. Amanda, how are you doing? It's a new year, new we.
What?
Plural. I was new year, new me, but it's two of us. So. Yeah. How's it going?
It's completely derailed me.
Anyway.
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Excellent.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I've got a wax mask over my gigantic head.
And you're a gentleman, except when you've got a couple drinks in you.
Yes. Listen, don't tell people that. Today, so we are new year, new episodes.
New us.
New we. And our Patreon coverage for this year is going to be remakes and reboots.
Yes.
And so what we're going to try to do is every month when we pick the remake we're going to do, we are also going to do on our main feed the movie that is being remade.
Yes. From the list.
From the list.
Yes.
Well, sometimes not, because I think there's a couple that may or may not be on the list.
Cool.
Like I don't think The Blob is on the list.
Yeah, just doing away with the whole concept of the podcast, huh?
Listen, this is like year 5.
Yeah.
You gotta
keep it fresh.
Keep people interested.
Fresh and new and interesting.
Yeah. And so the first movie that was chosen is House of Wax, which was remade in 2005, but we're going to be talking about the 1953 Vincent Price version, which, in an interesting twist, is in and of itself a remake.
Oh no, do we have to like Inception this and go a level deeper?
No. We'll talk about it a little bit, but
fair enough.
I think our listener, our friend Kyle, has gone deep enough as it is for himself.
Right. Okay.
So, House of Wax, 1953. It is on our list. It is number 110. It has a 93% Rotten Tomatoes score, 73 audience percentage. Had you seen this before?
I had, but I don't think I'd seen the whole thing.
Yeah.
There were parts of this that were extremely familiar to me, mostly the stuff in the Wax Museum, and then there were parts of this where I went, "Wait, what?" Like the ending.
Yes.
Yes.
That's quite a finale. That final sequence is something else.
Yes.
I had seen this once or twice before, I think. This was one I caught as I was trying to deepen my bench as far as horror movies go. Probably when I started watching Vincent Price stuff, this is probably one I picked up. And I bought it on Blu-ray, actually at this point, probably a couple years ago, specifically because I knew we were going to do it eventually.
Yeah.
And the Blu-ray is in 3D.
Yes.
So Amanda and I got to watch this in 3D.
So good.
Which, if you are the director of this movie, is the only way he would allow people to play it when he was in the presence of the film.
Oh.
So like if he got invited to a festival or something and they said, "Oh, we're going to play the 2D version," he would say, "If you do that, I will leave." So
wow, really dedicated to the whole 3D conceit.
It sounds like it was a pain in the ass to do.
Okay. So it's sort of like I went through all this work and you are all going to appreciate it.
I mean, it is. I think it's, we'll talk about the 3D, but I think it is. I think it's a very good 3D movie.
Yeah. It is.
But we are going to take a quick break, play the trailer, and we'll get into it.
House of Wax, the ultimate dimension in terror, comes to the screen in Stereovision 3D. Vincent Price, at his diabolical best, will take you room by terrible room on a journey to the ultimate chamber of horrors. Stereovision 3D will synthesize before your eyes the terrifying reality of it all. In Stereovision 3D, House of Wax.
Okay. House of Wax from 1953, directed by Andre de Toth. You know, the strangest, most interesting thing about this director on this film specifically, this three-dimensional film,
yes.
The director only had one eye.
That's fucking amazing.
Yeah. And so
I love that.
He used to wear an eye patch.
Yeah.
And on this movie specifically, Warner Brothers asked him not to wear an eye patch so he wouldn't look weird in publicity photos.
No, but this is the movie you want to look weird in publicity photos for.
You'd think so.
Oh, those fools.
But it was the kind of thing apparently where he had to then essentially mathematically work out how all the 3D worked, because it was this, I'm not going to try and go through the entire process because I don't really understand it, but it was basically two cameras that mimic the idea of, you have two eyes, and so two cameras.
Well,
some people do, yeah. And so the idea is it's kind of like mimicking the way your eyes work.
Okay.
And so they had two cameras that they would face each other and have mirrors in front of the lenses, and they would angle the mirrors in such a way that basically the cone of vision would be close enough that it would approximate the what you would see through your eyes. And so one camera was recording what would be only left eye, the other camera would be the right eye. And so since he only had one eye, he basically had to break it down mathematically and did a pretty good job.
No wonder he only wanted it to be shown in 3D.
Yeah,
it absolutely was like, I went through all this work to make this happen, and you will appreciate my art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was written by Crane Wilbur and Charles Belden. And it's one of those things, too, where this is the kind of story that I think they've done so many times that you kind of, or some approximation of it, that you kind of think, oh, this must be based on something from like a book or something.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's just a story.
Yeah.
This is based on the movie that came before it. And
and that movie was based on some guy's ideas.
Yeah, like Wolfman. All the stuff in the Wolfman,
yeah,
it's not from folklore. It's just made up by the guy for the movie. And it stars Vincent Price, Frank Lovejoy, Phyllis Kirk, Carolyn Jones. Carolyn Jones is the blonde woman who, I did not know as we were watching it, is also Morticia Addams from the Addams Family.
Also did not realize it as we were watching it, but when I was poking around this evening before we started recording, I saw it and was like, holy shit. Yeah, it is.
Yes. Thankfully, she got to wear a looser corset on the Addams Family. A little bit looser.
Oh, my God.
Paul Percini, Roy Roberts, Paul Kavanaugh, and introducing the young ingenue, Charles Bronson. Amanda, what happens in House of Wax?
Sculptor Henry is horrified to learn that his business partner, Matthew, plans on torching their wax museum to collect on the insurance policy. Henry miraculously survives the fiery confrontation with Matthew and reemerges some years later with a museum of his own. But when the appearance of Henry's new wax sculptures occurs at the same time that a number of corpses vanish from the city morgue, Sue Allen begins suspecting wrongdoing.
It's always suspicious when a wax museum shows up and bodies start disappearing.
They don't really put that together very well.
No, especially when the wax museum is presenting murders that just happened.
Yes, and all of the corpses have gone missing. Well, Clay, some things you'll find in House of Wax include turn of the century business deals. Yeah.
We had a hard time figuring out exactly when this movie took place and where.
Yeah.
And the original, the 1935 version, starts in England and then moves to New York.
Okay, that makes sense.
This one, I believe, is entirely in America.
Yes.
But the first opening sequence definitely feels like it's...
Yeah, it's very Jack the Ripper-y.
Yes, very foggy, very England.
Yes. Dueling wax museums.
One of my favorite things. It's funny because we've talked about Hannibal before, the show. And one of the things that I kind of turned me off about that, and also like Dexter, is the idea that not only is there a serial killer out there, there are multiple and they fight each other.
Yes, there are rivalries amongst.
But for some reason, I do find that to be enjoyable when it's something silly like this, where
Like
it's
wax
like
museums.
dueling wax museum. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the dueling wax museum.
No, but we get to hear about them.
Yes, but magicians, dueling magicians, I'm always going to show up for that.
The Prestige.
Yes, and to a lesser extent, The Illusionist.
Yeah.
That was a bad movie. I don't like that movie.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't think I ever saw it. A 3D Oktoberfest, so real you can smell the beer.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Oktoberfest, but it was like a German beer garden.
It's like
or
a
something.
Hofbrauhaus.
Yes.
It's like a German Oktoberfest-styled restaurant that was clearly, at least in the world of this movie, very in vogue.
Yes.
A romantic trip to Niagara Falls.
Unfortunately, they don't get to go, but
Stop in Buffalo, though.
that's where
to make it legitimate.
that's where Lois and Clark had their honeymoon suite in Superman 2 that they had to awkwardly share. And then Lois decided to prove that Clark was Superman by jumping into the falls.
Jesus.
Yeah. Didn't work the way she wanted it to, but
Because she died.
no.
No, we don't have to follow this.
We can talk about Superman 2 for the runtime.
later.
Because General Zod... No, okay.
Friends in name only.
Yeah, Morticia Addams had a real what was that friend's name from the Advent calendar?
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
Similar kind of friend where she was a friend in name only.
I don't know. I think she was a better friend than that. She gave her some money. She only asked her to tighten her corset.
She was gonna give her money.
No, she gave her the 50 cents that she had.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
She was gonna give her more money, but she was
for
dead.
no reason, just because she was friends, and she was like, "You need the
Because
money."
she knew she had a guy.
Yeah.
She had a
but-
whale on the line.
Yeah, but still,
Where'd it get her?
She's sharing the wealth.
Dead.
An extremely athletic burn victim.
Yeah, was that limp that he had? Was he putting that on? Because he didn't seem to have it at the end of the movie.
We can talk about that later.
Anyway,
cop plot.
Yep, this very early. Well, I don't know. I guess they were kind of doing this. Both of these movies, the original and this, exist in an interesting era where this movie is sort of gothic horror was not a thing anymore when this came out, but noir movies were.
Yeah.
And so you get this weird mix of, it's a horror movie, but like the main characters end up being these two cops.
Yeah.
And my least favorite genre cliche was born. So
things have to be a little Hitchcockian.
Yeah.
Gaslighting by gaslight.
Yes, and also gaslight extinguishing.
Yes.
For arson reasons.
Gaslight explosions.
I can't believe... I recently... we went on a little bit of a vacation to Sleepy Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to this place called the Octagon House, which is a house that has 8 walls on it. So
I never would have guessed that.
As advertised.
Yes.
It's a Victorian house. And, they still have all the lamp fixtures and stuff.
That's cool.
And they have a lot of the gas lamps.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously not hooked up anymore. But...
Yeah.
I never really appreciated that these houses just had open flames connected to gas line. It's like if you were heating or the light in your house came from your stove.
Right.
In every single room.
Yes.
And that just seems incredibly dangerous.
Yes. I think it was.
Well, I'm glad we moved away from it.
Another monster obsessed with a lost love.
They always are.
Yeah. Even a wax love.
Yeah, I guess that's the only way they know how to build sympathy for a monster. Is to be,
you gotta be obsessed with some beautiful lady.
Some girl. Alive, dead, or wax.
Yes. Or never alive at all. Chekhov's Cauldron of Hot Wax.
Yeah. I was happy to see that.
Yes.
Because there was a couple shots of that cauldron that looked like Tim Burton copied them exactly for the first Joker sequence in Batman, which tickled me because I think so. I said this last night that I thought the villain Clayface was based off of Vincent Price's look in this, but Clayface was invented in 1940. However, the bad guy in the original looks very similar. So I think if I had to guess,
could trace a lineage.
Probably influenced by Lionel Atwill in Mysteries of the Wax Museum.
Nice. That would make a lot of sense.
And also, the other reason why I was tickled by that is because it reminded me of my favorite toy that I got as a child, which I am contractually obligated to bring up on any of the podcasts that I do, which is the Terminator 2 Bioflesh Regenerator, which is...
I'm sorry, the what?
The Terminator 2 Bioflesh Regenerator, which was...
That answered none of my questions.
Which
Go
was
on.
a toy that I wanted desperately, and when I got it, used it once and never used it again.
Of course.
Because what it was this like, basically this little station that came with T-800 endoskeletons they couldn't move, so they were static.
Yeah.
And you put them into these little molds that look like humans. And then you had this like liquid latex stuff basically that you would squeeze in through the top, and it would go into the mold, and you'd open the mold, and the skeleton would be covered by the skin.
Got it.
And then you'd have a Terminator where, like, if you were playing with it, he could get like a piece of his face blown off. Very cool in concept.
Yeah.
The commercial, killer commercial.
Oh, of course.
The toy, not great.
Garbage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think everybody who got one used it once. And because you couldn't reuse the goop. Because once the goop like solidified, that was it.
Right, yeah.
And so you had to keep buying the goop.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody did that. So
right. If you get one packet of goop per set, then you get one Terminator.
Basically, yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Well, you'll also find an extended can Sequence.
Great use of 3D.
And an artistic 3D film with absolutely no gimmicks.
No gimmicks. None whatsoever.
Not can girls.
Nope.
Not throwing things at the camera.
None.
Nope. Not a
extended paddleball sequence.
Spear just coming through a door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what an amazing way to get people back into a movie after a 10-minute intermission. Just an extended paddleball sequence. Anyway,
yes.
House of Wax from 1953. Like I said, this is a remake of Mystery of the Wax Museum, which was directed by Michael Curtiz, who also directed a couple movies called Casablanca and White Christmas. And at the time, in early 1950s, people were moving away from the cinemas because they were moving out of the cities, and also because they all had TVs now.
Yep.
And so the movies needed to come up with new gimmicks to get people back into the theater.
Paddleball.
And 3D was a big new invention. What I didn't realize, the traditional blue and red glasses?
Yeah.
That wasn't something they used in the movies. At least not at this time. They used the same kind of stuff we used the other night.
Yeah.
The blue and red were used primarily in comic books.
Oh.
Yeah. I think there may have been a period where they did that in movies, but I think primarily not.
I still find it so fascinating that, my very young assumption that 3D stuff came about in, I don't know, the 80s is so wrong.
Yeah.
That they were doing it so long ago. And then this is my misunderstanding, but it seems to have fallen out of vogue.
Oh, yeah.
And then come back.
So 3D was a viable thing for about a year and a half. Mainly because in order to do it, you needed to have two projectors that were completely in sync. And with this movie in particular, Warner Brothers had developed a sound system. I can't remember what it's called, but they called it like stereophonic or something. And they called it like Warnerphonic or something like that, which required a whole new sound system to be put into the theater.
Oh, wow.
So basically, it was just a pain in the ass to do.
Yeah.
And the reason this movie has a 10-minute intermission, which we were saying it's an hour-and-a-half movie, this isn't Lawrence of Arabia, why is there an intermission, is because since most theaters had two projectors, so when they did the changeover at the reel breaks, they could change it over on one and then set the next one up on the other.
Yeah.
But since they were using both projectors, they couldn't do that.
They had to pause.
Yes.
And reset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was two big reels, or I guess technically four, for this movie.
Yeah.
And so they would break in the middle, boot everything else up, and then get back into it.
No wonder this didn't continue to be a viable.
And every time, it seems it happens every time.
Yeah.
Because in the 80s it came back briefly, and then it was like, eh. And then
people get really into it for a little while. Then it's like, well, I don't really need that though.
Yeah. And it came back about 10 years ago? Probably more than that.
Maybe more like 15.
Yeah, I guess Avatar was 2009-ish?
Probably.
Yeah. And that lasted, I think, probably a little longer because I mean they're still doing it to some extent.
Yeah, they still do it. It's just not quite the event that it used to be.
They made TVs. I know that because I have one.
And thank God you do.
Yeah. Again, I bought that with I didn't even realize it was a 3D TV. They were
awesome.
Basically just throwing it in.
It's so great.
Yeah, the DVD player too. I have a the one I have now is a 4K player that just also does 3D. So
good job.
Yeah.
Good setup.
It looks pretty good.
It's really fun. It's really fun to be able to watch, like, especially this and when we did Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
Like, watching these kinds of movies in 3D, there's something, I don't know, to me that's just so interesting about it.
Yeah.
Like, historically, and thinking about, like, wow, they were doing this back in 1953.
Yeah. And it looks really good, too.
Yeah.
Like, I still am blown away by Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
Because that 3D, like, a
lot of the swimming scenes.
They were
like
using
that.
the 3D in that movie and also in this movie. We made the joke about there's no gimmicks. There's obviously gimmicks, but it's everything is so well constructed in this movie to really take advantage of the space and the depth you can get from 3D.
Yes, like the staging of different scenes really, really calls your attention to it in a, like, crafty way, especially the early scene with the fire.
Yes.
Like that one.
Oh, yeah.
Like having the depth of into the screen of that is really cool.
And even the way that that set is designed. Mm-hmm. Like the way that the banisters kind of jut out at certain angles.
Yeah, and the stairs kind of come down and around a little bit. Yeah.
It's very cool. And I think it's a lot, there's a lot smarter uses of it here than you see later on when it just becomes 90 minutes of paddleball or Friday the 13th Part 3, where it's like, what if we have an extended yo-yo sequence followed by someone just poking a pole towards the screen for some reason?
Yep.
But yeah, we start off with this sequence where we're introduced to Vincent Price's character and his shady business partner.
Yes.
And it ends in this spectacular sequence of the wax museum going up in flames, which looks unbelievable, but all I could think of is how incredibly dangerous this was.
Yeah.
And it looks like Vincent Price is doing a number of his own stunts.
I know they both had stunt doubles, but I think they were in there a fair amount. Like, based on what I could find.
The one that got me, and I saw, when I was watching some of the special features, I saw the sequence again. The last thing that happens when he runs underneath the overhang and the overhang collapses, he runs through a door, but he doesn't go, like, off the set.
Yeah.
He runs into the door, and, like, you can still see him when the thing comes down.
Yes, he's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. He is, like, I love the way his character is introduced in this movie because it's so over the top. Like, he's so weird right away.
Yeah.
This is not one of the Vincent Price movies where for a single second you think he's a normal dude.
Yeah. It's the kind of movie where once you see what happens to him, you go, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was, the way he was talking about those wax figures,
He was halfway here already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where he refers to them as his children or his friends or his people. And he's not concerned with the business. He's not concerned with anything else. It's implied that he doesn't have any other sort of relationships in his life.
Right.
Like, if he gets killed in this flaming wax museum, no one's around to miss him. He doesn't have no one's inheriting from him.
The normal way they would do this is that he has a wife or something.
Yes, and she dies in the fire with him or something like that. Yeah.
Or she goes on and he comes back and he's the, lovelorn monster.
Yeah. He's a lovelorn monster, but his love is a wax figure of Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
Which I did not realize when we watched it, but the face of Marie Antoinette in the beginning is Sue's face.
Oh, sure.
Like they used the model, like the main character woman. Like,
that makes sense.
It's her in the beginning. She is the model for Marie Antoinette before we ever meet that character. So when later on in the movie, she almost becomes Marie Antoinette. It's very fitting.
Yeah, just like Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes. Yeah. Oceans of Time, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. What's really funny is in the original, all of the close-ups on all the wax figures are just people. So they close up and it's just someone standing there, and you can kind of, they do really well, but you can kind of see like a little
just
bit
like
of sway
a little,
to it.
like a eyelash flickers. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I love the sequence when the fire has begun and they're just cutting to all that.
Oh man, it's brutal.
Oh my God.
Brutal.
It's so creepy too, like the melting faces and the eyeballs popping out of them. It's I love it.
Yeah. That sequence was very dangerous.
Can you imagine the smell?
No. Apparently so dangerous imagine I came up with a great segue.
Great.
Right before the shoot, the director's crew set 3 spot fires in strategic locations. Then the cameras started rolling and everything went downhill. The team quickly lost control of their fires, which merged into a massive inferno that put a hole in the soundstage roof and singed Vincent Price's eyebrows. Oof. But because the rapidly melting wax mannequins would have been very hard to replace, DeToth kept on filming, even as firemen arrived to help extinguish the flames. So...
this movie sounds like an extraordinarily dangerous movie to film.
Yeah.
In addition to, because did you read the trivia about the guillotine?
No.
That it was a real guillotine?
Oh, you gotta.
And they were like, yeah, we'll just, you lay there and we're going to really let the thing drop and we'll rescue you from it before it comes and hits you. Mm-hmm. And the stunt guy was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely not. I'm not. And they were like, well, the blade hasn't been sharpened. And he was like, what?
It'll just bounce off you.
So I guess they had to have some sort of like, okay, we'll try it a little more like this. Maybe somebody will hold part of it. But you know.
Do they not know how movies are made?
No.
Like that's crazy.
It seems like they were just like, let's do it for real on everything they did. And so they did. The stunt guy, when Scott Andrews gets his head in the guillotine, is about to die before the cops save him, the stunt guy for that scene agreed to do one take.
Nice.
And that was the take.
Nice.
Yeah. Because he was like, you're not going to actually chop my head off.
Yeah.
So this whole movie sounds like it was that the whole time.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I think I've said this before. One of the things that I miss from modern movies is
the danger that people were put on.
I think you can get
the
that
peril of being on set.
You can get that without actually putting people in danger, ideally. But there is a certain amount of danger you don't feel as much anymore because they are not doing stuff like this anymore for good reason. Yeah. But it's then you hear these stories about stuff like that, or what was the one when we went to the Paramount studio tour. They were talking about Hitchcock filming Rear Window, and he had dug a basement under one of the studios so he could roll real cars in. And drive real cars through there to create this street scene. And they're driving these cars into this enclosed set, and someone died from like smoke inhalation, basically. So if you watch the movie, anytime you see a car, it's moving in tandem with a person because that person is pushing the car. Which they learned they could do that after somebody died. Oh my God. And it's stuff like that where it's like, come on, guys, this isn't 1920. They've been doing this for a while. Right. Like
there is an easier way to do this with the level of authenticity that you want it to have, but also maybe not killing anybody via inhalation.
Ideally, yeah. That being said, I miss fire, man. Real fire in movies. Ugh. The 3 things I miss: real fire,
car crashes,
real car crashes, and squibs.
Ah.
All the blood hits are CGI now, and it's just not the same.
That's fair. Yeah.
Anyway.
So this is a nice and dangerous film.
Loved it.
Set for you.
Fantastic.
So you feel good about it.
Yeah, nobody died. That's fine. In retrospect.
Yeah.
You can enjoy it.
With the safety of 60 plus years.
Yeah. Have I showed you that clip from the Italian movie where the guy gets sideswiped by the car?
Yes.
Most unbelievable thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I hope he was okay. I'm going to assume he was, but anyway.
I mean, in this movie, we get to there's that great moment in that initial I'm burning down the museum, and the two main characters, Henry and Matthew, have their fight in the burning museum, and the guy who plays Matthew picks up like a I don't remember what he throws, but he chucks something and it clearly hits the camera.
Hits the camera.
He hits the camera. And it's a great 3D moment, but also he hit the camera.
Yeah.
The camera shakes a little bit. I love it.
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that it's not was it this? It must have been this. Where I was thinking about how much I appreciate longer shots. Like they don't cut a lot. I'm sure it's probably, especially the way they shot this, probably more difficult to do a lot of cutting.
Yeah.
But there's just something missing when from movies where or I should say there's a little bit more magic to it when you let two people play a scene.
Yeah.
And aren't just constantly cutting around at different angles and stuff, you know.
Yeah, because it is the kind of thing where, especially in movies where it's maybe not done quite as much finesse as it should have, that when you notice that that's happening, that during a conversation, it's constant, like the angles are constantly changing a little bit. You're like, once you notice it, you know, it's like, oh, okay, they did like 75 takes.
Yeah.
And like, they're just sort of jigsaw piecing this together to get the version that they want.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that sort of, I don't know, that almost like stage play feeling that scenes in a movie like this have a little more so, where it's like, oh, okay, here's the room we are in.
Yeah.
And here are the characters we are dealing with. And now they will move about a space, like a real space.
Yeah. That's, it's one of those things where, like if you watch Jaws, probably the first couple times you watch it, you don't recognize it, but Spielberg gets around that really well by basically having people block themselves into places that you would normally like cut because they didn't have like time or money to do it.
Yeah.
So you'd have people start at the back and then one person would move closer to the camera instead of cutting to a close-up.
Yeah.
Guy's pretty good.
Yeah, he's all right.
Anyway, so obviously a couple years go by. 12 years? Is it 12 years? No, I think in the original they say 12 years.
I don't know if they ever specify, but it does not feel like 12 years because, I mean, the business partner is still talking about Vincent Price's character's death, you know?
Oh, right, because he brings Morticia to the Oktoberfest.
Her name is Kathy.
When you said Matthew, not in a million, you could give me $100,000. I could not have told you that character's name was Matthew.
Matthew Burke.
Amazing.
It's almost like she does homework before she comes to record this.
Names don't matter.
But I love the way that this movie moves from...
The only name that I did remember was Jared. Because when we were watching it last night, they kept saying Jared, and I was like, his name's Jared?
It's like Gerard.
Yeah, it's his last name. But they kept saying Jared. It's like,
They do call him Professor Jared.
Jared the monster.
Yeah. So this is the professional sculptor, Jared. Yeah.
Makes great rings.
Yeah. But I love that this kind of cuts from the burning building where you think Vincent Price has died, or you're supposed to think Vincent Price has died in this burning thing. And then we get the date between the business partner and Kathy.
Yeah.
That scene is so funny.
Yeah.
Especially once later on you see Kathy with Sue. And her voice is totally different. Her mannerisms are completely different. And she's talking about like, well, yeah, of course, like I have to find a good man. Like I'm not smart. Like this is all I have. Like I got to do something with what I got. And what I got is I'm pretty. So I have to find a man with money. It's like, good for you, Kathy. But I love that you see this date between the two of them, and then it's only a little later you realize how phony both of them are being.
Yes.
Like they're both being super fake with one another.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes into, you know, if you want to get a little bit like, ooh, let's talk about big themes or whatever. Jared's feelings that his wax figures are more real than real people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's this kind of thing because people show you the face they think you want to see.
Right.
And they can be more fake than... He's like, no, if I make a wax figure of Marie Antoinette, she stands there. She's Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
And then everybody else is running around.
It's like Billy Joel's a stranger.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly like that. That's probably where he got the inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all have a face we hide away forever. Take them out and show ourselves when everyone is gone. That's exactly what this movie is about.
Amen.
Actually, that's one thing where if I think there's a remake in here that does play more with that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think you definitely can read into that, but
sure.
They're probably not leaning into that as much as one might want to.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I do think there are a lot of opportunities in this movie in a different interpretation of it, where you could talk about like industrialization of society, because like there are a couple of funny throwaway comments about cars.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They're talking about like automobiles and things like that. There's the sort of Jared himself not being able to sculpt anymore, so he brings in these apprentices and sort of sets up a like, you're going to be like my factory of making wax people.
That was the thing that stood out to me as the most interesting thematic element was how when at the beginning of the movie Jared. It's just funny to me. Jared
call him
is
Vincent Price.
Jared is so dedicated to his art, and the commerce angle is not really something he cares about.
Right.
And then when he comes back, his art. First of all, he's turned his art from the focus from beauty towards horror, and secondly, what used to be an art form, he has now turned into a mass production line.
Yes.
And there's a certain cynicism to him that I found really interesting, and it reminded me a bit. This still tickles me because it's like one of the closest things you get to like a real life Batman villain. Where I was watching some show about like restaurants or something.
Sure.
And they went to this place called like, I don't know if it was called the Heart Attack Grill, but anyway, it's like a hospital themed fast food restaurant.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Where it has like a trough of all you can eat French fries.
This is the most American thing I've ever heard of.
And
in my
like
life.
17 patty burgers, that kind of thing, those kind of things. All the waitresses are dressed like nurses and all the men are dressed like doctors. And they have wheelchairs, which they
should also be dressed like nurses.
That's true, yes. Or the women can be dressed like doctors too, okay?
Well, I just meant they're all in scrubs.
Oh, yeah, that works. I just trying to get ahead of your sexism here. They have wheelchairs at the ready, and they will wheel you to your car in a wheelchair after you've done gorging yourself.
This is dystopian.
It gets better.
Oh,
they're talking to the owner and the founder of this restaurant.
No.
And he's talking, he's blah, 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 blah. And then he just drops in, I used to be a nutritionist. and blah, blah. And I was like, what? Like, clearly this guy was broken by the way people consume food and was like, you know what? You want it? I'll fucking give it to you. You guys don't want to be healthy? I'll give you exactly what you want, and I hope you choke on it and die.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that is Jared's entire arc.
Yeah.
In this movie is he starts off being like, no, beauty and art and the finer things in life and showing people history through the lens of beautiful things, and then he turns into, all right, you want the macabre? I will give you something even more macabre than you could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
And I hope you choke on it and die. Jesus Christ.
But yeah, I found that angle to be really interesting. I think it's really fun, especially with these older popcorn movies, which I don't know, maybe the screenwriter was going for something like that, but it's so much fun to be able to find these kernels of stuff.
Yes.
Like that's
stuff that's more just like included because it was, in the source material, it was kind of the time.
Yeah.
Like it was still something people were processing just in like a pop culture way.
Yeah.
Not in like a, A24. Let's have a movie about.
Honestly, A24 Wax Museum remake, I'm fucking there.
No, it would be great, but I mean more the like unintentional inclusion of these things because they're just in the ether.
Yeah.
They're just kind of in the background of people's minds, and it's what's happening at the time in the world of the movie. So it's like, all right, that's why it's in there.
Yeah.
Like even the you could argue that there's a little bit of a panic in this movie about young women living independently.
Which they shouldn't do.
Jesus, Clay.
Only they should. Like,
inside thoughts.
Like Sith, there should always be at least two of them.
A master and an apprentice.
Yes.
But there's the boarding house where Kathy and Sue are living in adjacent rooms, and they're both young single women, and they're trying to make it in the world. Kathy's doing it by trying to find a rich guy to marry, and Sue's trying to find a job.
Right.
And every time she tries to find a job, she gets sexually harassed. And so she keeps not getting a job.
That's just how it was back then, Amanda. Come on, lighten up.
But the place she runs to for safety is this friend of her mother's. At least that's what I read it's supposed to be.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I could be wrong. If I am, I hope someone corrects me. But the thing that I had read was...
Well, we're going to get letters.
Yes. Love it. The thing that I had read said that Andrews' mother, who, she runs to the house when she's being chased through the streets, was friends with her mother.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, once you're back in a family home with like a matriarch, then she's safer.
Yeah.
She's not totally safe, but she's much safer there than she was at the boarding house.
Yeah.
And so there is this little undercurrent of kind of worry about women like living outside of the family home. Where it's like, oh, but it's dangerous. You're going to get killed by a maniac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
Look what happened.
You have something to say about it, Clay? You seem...
she was so gorgeous. Struck down in her prime. From Malden or Medford?
Yeah. I think it's Medford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should have a statue.
I think there's a plaque.
Is there really?
I think there's a plaque
no
somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that really stood out to me this time was this site. So I found the idea that his revamped wax museum,
Yes.
like the big attraction was taking murders that just happened,
Yes.
like ripped from the headlines,
Yes.
and making
Local murders.
and making wax dioramas of these murders.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not a gory movie. That's one of the most ghoulish things I've ever heard.
Yeah. Ghoulish is the perfect word
Yeah.
for it, too.
And I was like, my God, that would imagine if somebody did that for real now, like that wouldn't fly. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, well, we kind of do it. I mean, not with wax, but I mean.
Yeah. We're not literally stealing corpses from the morgue.
Right.
But we are collectively as a society stealing these stories from the people that they happen to and immediately recycling them, often in real time, into podcasts and ID channel specials. And...
I'm not going to pretend I didn't love The People versus O.J. Simpson, because I did.
Yeah.
It's great.
But even that's further back now. There's stuff, like podcasts now where, locally in the Boston area, there was the whole Karen Reed trial. And that was a podcast like as it was happening.
Yeah, I think I missed that entire thing because I
felt like it was inescapable for a while.
Yeah, I saw one person I knew like posting about it frequently. And I was like, what the hell is this? And that was the only thing I was at my parents' house and they're like, oh, the Karen Reed. I'm like, what is this story?
Yeah. Social media really launched it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is this sort of like urge we all have to recycle crime and the macabre and turn it into some sort of entertainment. Like we all can't help. And I'm extremely guilty of this.
Oh, sure.
I'm a huge true crime person.
Yeah.
And so, we all gawk at these things.
I think less of you because of it.
Good.
Yeah.
You should. And I hope you do. It's my goal is to lower your opinion of me so much that you can't help but fire me.
Mission accomplished.
But yeah, I think this movie absolutely plays with that. The people's simultaneous repulsion and drive to get close to these sort of ghoulish events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't get too heady about it, but it is interesting that this is obviously this is as close to a remake of anything you could possibly get, because the original is basically the exact same story. But what's interesting about the time that this is being made is, as I was saying earlier, it is, and during the advent of TV. Yeah. And obviously TV becomes the foremost vehicle for these kinds of stories.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they were doing it on radio as well, but I guess it's maybe it's unfair to pinpoint time because, like what you're saying, I think it's something that people have always done.
Yeah.
You know, there was when John Dillinger was killed, there were people running to sop up his blood.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
God, yeah.
in the 1800s, they would put corpses out for everybody to look at.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
It's always been something people have been morbidly curious about.
Yes.
But yeah, for whatever reason, the wax figure reenactment specifically was something I was like, oh, that's too far.
Yeah. Well, because in this movie, it's not just a reenactment, right?
Yeah,
like
but
he's,
like even
he's
so,
killing them.
Like imagine,
and then taking the corpses.
True, but like imagine if next week at Madame Tussauds on 42nd Street, they opened a new, what's the word I'm looking for? New attraction.
Yeah.
That was a wax reenactment of that CEO getting shot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like,
yes.
I don't think that would go over too well.
No, it would be extremely poor taste.
Yeah, regardless of what you think about that whole situation, you'd go,
right.
Ugh.
Right. You'd be like, maybe it's too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Madame Tussauds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was too classy for something like that, though. You ever go to that place? You ever go to a wax museum?
No. I've been to other places that have had like little exhibits and like wax figures. I've been like past a Madame Tussauds where they put a couple out and things like that. But I don't recall ever having paid to go in.
I've never been to Madame Tussauds because it seems like it's outrageously expensive.
Yes.
But actually, a place where you can go to many reasonably priced wax museums is Niagara Falls.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually where I was thinking.
Yeah, I went to, my family went there years and years ago, and they had one that was specifically movie monsters.
Yes.
And I went into that, and somehow my sister agreed to go with me. But she made it about halfway and then had to leave because she was too scared.
Aw.
And it was, I want to say it was sad. But I think I found it also, it tickled me a little bit. When she went through the exit door, she pushed the exit door open, and there was a life-size 7-foot alien from movie Alien, just like, ah. And so she screamed and just ran, and I was like, yeah, she'll be fine.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, they're weird. It's a weird
thing. It's a weird genre of entertainment, even when it's not highlighting like macabre stories. If it's just like, yes, here is a celebrity. Like it is, when it's well done, it's really eerie.
Yeah, it is.
It taps into that uncanny valley thing, even when it's an otherwise kind of innocent figure of just like, oh yes, here's like famous person number 4. And it's still jarring when it's like that close to looking normal, like a real person, and just off kilter enough to be unsettling.
Yeah.
Like the scene in this movie where Sue is alone in the dark, kind of looking for her maybe sort of boyfriend, and just kind of walking around in the wax museum. I'm like, that must be freaky.
Yeah, especially because
that must be freaky.
The dude who is it Mark who hanged himself, that he kills, the first guy he kills.
Yeah, Matthew. Yeah.
Mark, Luke,
Burke.
John, doesn't matter.
His last name is Burke.
He's still hanging.
Yes.
Like in the background.
Yeah, he like gently swinging on a rope.
Yeah. And all the wax figures in this are incredible. They're very, very good. They were done by a woman named Catherine Stuberg. And I do have one bone to pick with them though.
Oh.
Isn't Joan of Arc, didn't she famously have short hair?
I don't know.
Or is that just like a creation of movies?
That's why I'm hesitating, because my personal mental image of her is also with short hair, but I think that might be like an apocryphal thing rather than a factual thing. Yeah. I'm not sure.
I read Mark Twain's book about Joan of Arc.
Oh.
It's a good book, but I don't remember.
Big Joan of Arc fan over here, huh?
Well, I went through a period. Why did I do that? I went through a period where, it's because of the book I was reading a couple years ago called You'll understand why I took it such a deep breath when I tell you the title. The origin of human consciousness and the deterioration of the bicameral mind.
Jesus.
Deterioration? Different word, but that was the title basically. And it's about this idea where like human consciousness began once humans developed an internal monologue, which was not something that we were born with. And it kind of traces this pathway down from the creation of this idea of the internal monologue and how that sort of fed into the creation of certain gods and like the idea that the kings were gods because the thing the kings were saying were things that you had in your head. And so it's like, well, if they're in my head, they must be gods. And there's a whole section about gods talking to people and also about Joan of Arc. We've probably talked about this.
I think we did it. This is sounding familiar.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while. We probably covered this. But so it got me kind of interested again in Joan of Arc. And I love the movie The Messenger, which is, it's awesome. With Mila Jovovich plays Joan of Arc. I think it's great. It's kind of hard to find. I think it's out of print generally now. Yeah. But it's worth watching if you can find it. And so I had watched that and I was like, all right, that's still pretty good. And then I was looking for another book to read, so I decided to pick up the Mark Twain book, and it's a pretty. He really loved Joan of Arc.
I get the feeling a lot of people did.
Yeah,
like they loved the idea of her at least.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, the kind of legend that built up around her.
Yeah, and only after all of that did I discover what Gilderay was up to.
Oh yeah,
which. One of the most prolific child murderers in history, supposedly. Because so that was the thing. Obviously, he's become he's become legendary.
I'm gonna give him a probably. Maybe upgrade it from supposedly to we think so.
He's become legendary as this like Freddy Krueger level child killer.
Yes, yeah.
But as I was reading stuff BFFs. About it, it's very strange. He was like her number 2 or something.
Yeah. He like saved her life and shit like that. Yeah.
As I was looking into him, there are people who think that might have been something that he was smeared by as a reason to, imprison and execute him.
Oh, interesting. Sort of when she fell out of favor, he kind of had to go
something
with,
like that.
or his downfall helped.
Yeah, there was
give them excuse to get rid of her.
All sorts of political machinations involved.
It was an insane time.
Who's to say? Vlad Tepes wasn't what they thought he was, but he lives forever as Dracula, and what's better than that?
Nothing is
better than being Dracula.
Nothing is better than that. I do find it really interesting that they talk about Joan of Arc being just like a mainstay of wax museums. Yeah. They're just like, yes, and every wax museum has Joan of Arc. I was like, wait, really? Is that true?
Ironically, because you don't want to get the wax figures near fire.
Right. It's kind of feels like a joke, like even if they did that in real life.
Yeah. Also, the wax figures in both versions are almost identical. Like the staging of the Joan of Arc, almost identical in both movies. Marie Antoinette, it's the same character. So it is they did take quite a bit
from the original movie.
Yeah. Huh. One thing I was really surprised by was how quickly and how clearly they show Vincent Price's scarred monster face. Like, they don't try to hide it at all.
So this I wanted to ask you about this. Do you think when this movie came out that the assumption was that the audience would not realize immediately that it's Vincent Price?
I was wondering that as well.
I think it's supposed to be a bit more of a reveal. I think you're supposed to start to suspect him later in the movie, but I think it's supposed to be more shocking that he can stand up out of his wheelchair.
I think you're probably right.
And that he's the one doing it. That it's not, there's not some other figure kind of lurking around somehow.
Yeah. Watching the original, one thing that they do differently is, from the way that I was reading it, I'm pretty sure they're trying to make you think that the drunk helper is actually the one who's doing all this.
Yeah.
Because in the original, the way they play him and like him dropping stuff off is a lot more sinister.
Yeah.
And they kind of have similar facial hair and stuff. So I think that's the way they're trying to do it is,
and that would make sense because the assumption would be at the time like during the period, oh, he's already a criminal.
Yeah.
Like when you find out that he's been arrested and gone to prison in the past, you're like, oh, he's gone to prison and he's a drunk.
Yeah.
He's violent. This is probably the guy. He's probably the one doing the bad stuff.
In order for that to, and maybe this is what they were doing, and I do like this idea. I guess you're supposed to think that he's wearing a mask, because the whole thing is the inversion where the normal face is the mask.
Right.
So to show him that much and to create this sort of like,
right, that maybe the scarred face is the disguise.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the moment where it's like, I know it's a little hokey, but the moment where Sue has been trapped, she's towards the end, she's been captured, and Vincent Price has chased her down into the workshop, and he's kind of grabbed her, and she just kind of hits at his face, and his face cracks.
Awesome.
And it comes off, and it like shatters into pieces, and the scarred face beneath is revealed. I think it's so well done. I love it.
It looks fantastic.
Yeah, it looks great.
It still looks really good.
Yeah.
And it was such a great moment that they lifted it completely for the abominable Dr. Phibes.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, you can't do it better than that, right?
Yeah.
Well, does Dr. Phibes, I think he pulls it off himself.
Yeah, is that what it, I can't remember.
I watched it recently. I should know.
Yeah.
But
Some either way, Vincent Price's face is a mask.
Yes, all the time.
Yeah, and speaking of that, this was Vincent Price up to this point had been a actor who was in a lot of kind of B movies. He had one, I guess you would call it starring role in a horror movie previously, which was in The Invisible Man Returns, which I guess only sort of counts because he's invisible until the last 30 seconds of the movie.
Poor Vincent Price.
But he had actually been, I didn't know this was a thing, he had been gray listed by the communist witch hunt that was going on.
Yes, McCarthy.
What's the name of that group? The Un-American Committee?
The
House Un-American Committee. There we go.
Yeah, led by Senator McCarthy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who turned out to be a huge drunk.
Hey, what a shock.
So he was gray listed and labeled as a, quote, pre-war anti-Nazi sympathizer, which meant that if you were against Hitler before World War II, that means you must be a communist.
Yeah.
So he was still getting work, but it was kind of like, you know.
Yeah, people had distanced themselves from him because he was perceived as being too sympathetic towards the lefties.
Yeah, and the director, when this movie came around, the director wanted him because he didn't want Karloff, and apparently the studio wanted Karloff. And Vincent Price took the role because he liked the script, but also because he liked the technology.
Yeah.
And he was someone who wanted to try and be at the forefront of stuff if he could.
So fucking cool.
Yeah, he seemed like an awesome dude.
I think he went through like a brief stumble along the line in his earlier days, like on his personal beliefs. I think when all of politics was real weird, like in the 30s.
Yeah. Well, it's so normal now.
I know. But I do remember reading some stuff about him where it was like, well, he wasn't, the best about like LGBTQ stuff, and he wasn't the best about, certain political things. But he seems like the type of person who genuinely like listened and learned and kind of said, oh shit, I was wrong about this, or I should have spoken up more to support these people. I think didn't his daughter come out as gay?
Yes.
I think so. It was.
I'm not totally sure.
He seems like he was just
familiar.
a good
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
Like he kind of was willing to evolve with the times and admit where he had been wrong in the past and like improve.
I believe he was a huge patron of the arts too.
Yes.
Like I think he had some sort of art gallery or something that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he kind of hadn't hit yet, and so he makes this movie, and this movie kind of jumpstarts his career, but it also jumpstarts the second like gothic horror wave.
Yeah.
Because this is 1953. We're right in the pocket of Sci-fi movies being the genre movie of choice. There's not there's no gothic stuff really happening.
We're all worried about nuclear everything.
Right. Yeah. And then after this, the gothic stuff starts to come back in Italy. I'm trying to remember who does it first. I know Curse of Frankenstein, which is the first Hammer movie, is like 58, I think.
Okay.
Followed by Horror of Dracula, which really kicks it off in England. The Italian stuff was starting to happen around the same time, where Mario Bava was starting to get into that stuff. And he's like, I wish that he got more play, because everything I learn about Italian genre movies, he's like one of, if not the most important figure in the history of
I
Italian
always forget
genre.
How far his career stretched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was I had been kind of getting into these the more gothic Italian horror movies. And I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about the evolution of it. And it was like, yeah, this guy directed the movie, but you'll notice the lighting and the colors are really cool because Mario Bava was the lighting guy. Or
he was just like there and working on this thing.
He was brought in to be the director when the other guy flaked out, was uncredited, but he kind of developed the look for this, which everybody else did. And then he ended up doing the first Giallo movie, the quote-unquote first Giallo movie, which was... The Girl Who Knew Too Much, which is a fun movie. But anyway.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I went cross-eyed and went down the Italian rabbit hole. But anyway, so like this movie sort of brings gothic horror back to the forefront.
Yeah.
But it doesn't jumpstart Price's horror career until 1958 when he does The Fly. Between this and The Fly, he does a shitload of TV.
Yeah.
And he does The Ten Commandments and like one or two other movies I never heard of. But it's after 1958, after The Fly, it's like all the bangers. Where House on Haunted Hill.
Yep.
I love that Bat,
movie.
all of that stuff, all of the classic Vincent Price stuff is in the late 50s into the 60s.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And the most interesting thing about this, in that respect, is I'm sorry, I don't mean to be talking at you.
No, it's okay. I will sit and listen to stories about Vincent Price all day.
Horrible golfer.
Good, because I hate golf.
Yeah, I get really interested in the tendrils of this stuff and seeing.
Yeah, because there are connections.
Yeah,
you can trace it where the origins of certain things were and how they moved through time.
And what I find interesting about Vincent Price's career is this movie existed before the boom for him, but this is the core structure of a Vincent Price movie.
Yes.
Moving forward.
It feels like it is derivative of all these other things he's done, but it's actually the first time he's doing it all.
And you've got, just off the top of my head, which my mind has now gone blank. Just off the top of my head, you've got The Abominable Dr. Fives, which is essentially the exact same plot as this.
Love that movie.
Theater of Blood, which we haven't done, but we will do, which is also basically House of Wax, but he's a Shakespeare actor.
Even better.
It's like a cross between this and House and Fives, because he's a Shakespeare actor who gets betrayed by critics and dies, and then he comes back and starts killing them, but each one he does in like a variety of different costumes based on plays.
Oh my God, I love it.
Shakespeare plays.
It's so dramatic. I love it.
Madhouse, which is a really fun kind of inversion of this, and I know there's another one that's like a really obvious one that I can't think of, but it's...
Well, in a bunch of the Poe cycle ones, he's maybe not this exact character, but he's something close.
Yeah.
Where he's this sort of eccentric, shut up and isolated and losing his tenuous grip on reality and withdrawing from society to the point where he becomes either insane, murderous, or both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, I think there is an argument to be made that alongside your Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, sea creature.
Yes.
There is another type of movie monster that is originated by Vincent Price, which is the idea of the person who is wronged, thought to be dead, and comes back for revenge.
Yeah, he's like the Phantom of the Opera.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess that's the first one. Yeah. Never mind. Weirdly, he never played the Phantom.
What's that nice argument you're developing over there?
Yeah.
Is it that beautiful balloon? Let me just pop it.
Yeah.
He should have played the Phantom. He would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would have been fantastic with a PH.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
But regardless, he's I feel like he is the icon for that character.
Yes, he's now become the archetype
Yeah.
of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't always love the sympathetic monster who's got the lost love kind of thing. I think it works here because it's so fucking weird. Where it's not just some woman, it's like he's lusting after a doll he made.
But he's not even really lusting.
True, yeah.
Like there's something... I find this character so interesting because he starts off already separate and kind of alienated from normal society and normal human love. He's got his sculptures and his art, and that is what makes him happy, and that is what he cares about. And when that is destroyed, it pushes what little tolerance he had for the trappings of traditional society. He doesn't care anymore. He's actively against it now. And in a weird way, it makes him more social because he's opening this big museum and giving the people what they want.
Yep.
But he has just fully broken with humanity at this point. His wax people are more real to him than human people.
Yeah.
And there's not his love for his Marie Antoinette is not a carnal love. It's not a lust thing. It's like an appreciation for a purity of beauty.
Yeah.
And I think that is what makes this character so interesting, because I wonder, is he really sympathetic?
Sure.
The thing that makes him sympathetic is that he was wronged by the business partner.
Yeah.
And his scarring and his disability was caused by somebody else's destructive act. And that's what makes him sympathetic. There's a different version of a similar story to this where you don't get that preface.
Right.
Where he just moves into town like a Stephen King villain
Yeah.
and opens a wax museum where he's killing people to make the figures. And you're like, oh, great, he's just insane.
That's most every other wax museum movie that was ever made.
Right, yeah, he's just a psycho killer who has come to psychotically kill. Like, that's...
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Yeah. That's all he is. And so it's interesting that this movie gives him a sort of sympathetic origin story, but he didn't have, like, loved ones and, like, attachments to begin with. So he's different, but he's not that different by the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's it is a weird level of sympathy, but when you take a step back, it's like, oh, this guy's nuts.
Yeah.
Like, even for
there's no romance.
Yes.
Like there a lot of the other sympathetic monsters, even say Bram Stoker's Dracula, there is a lot of the sympathy and the pathos comes from this romantic connection.
You're talking about the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you meant the book.
No,
Yeah.
I would have just said Dracula.
By B. Stoker.
Yes, by Mr. Stoker. But Gary Oldman's Dracula is his epic love affair across lifetimes with Mina is what makes him sympathetic, because his love for her is genuine, even if it has been perverted. You don't get that for this character. Even Dr. Phibes, who is the 10 to 15 years down the line version of this character, you don't see his romance with his wife, but when you learn about his backstory, that he had this beloved wife and these surgeons accidentally killed her on the operating table, it's like, oh, he's been driven mad with grief.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. She was cute. Understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But with Jared, you don't really get that human connection. So it's weird. He's sympathetic, but he's not.
Yeah. Also, when you really break down what he's doing, he's the worst kind of artist, because it's like if you came to my house and I pointed to a painting I did and I was like, isn't this the greatest piece of art you've ever seen?
Yes.
To the point where, should you harm it in any way, I will kill you.
Yeah. Do you want to give me tens of thousands of dollars so I can make more art?
See, that's where he He shouldn't have burned the place down.
No.
But he should have pushed harder to get that deal because he needs money. We can't just he's got to pay for that shit. Wax doesn't grow in trees.
But I think that's sort of indicative of his disregard for how society works.
Yeah.
Is that he doesn't care about the money. He's not focused on that. The practicalities are secondary to him to such an extent that he's got this tunnel vision on his art and nothing else. And I think that's what makes him, if you yourself are an impassioned artist, maybe extremely relatable. And if you are more of a dilettante like myself, less relatable.
Yeah, I just really appreciate that his answer when he comes back is the cynical, it's like what he's doing isn't even really art anymore. It's just revenge.
Yes.
It's just cynical.
This is like slightly off onto a different topic. There are so many moments and lines in this movie that are genuinely hilarious.
Yes.
I am always surprised when I watch a movie like this that kind of has the reputation of this schlocky, macabre kind of gothic horror. And then the dialogue is genuinely funny at times. 90% of what Kathy says is hysterical. And a bunch of other little throwaway lines throughout the movie are really, really funny.
There's a line, I can't remember exactly what the line is. I remember it because it's the thing that the morgue attendants say, like something about a woman, like, the women always have to get the last word.
Yeah.
That is lifted directly from the original.
Yeah,
they do the exact same thing.
Yeah, that whole little bit between the two morgue attendants who they're bringing poor Kathy's body into the morgue, and another corpse just sits up.
Yep.
And they say, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's the embalming fluid. That one was the suicide. Just like a woman always has to have the last word."
Yeah.
There's all sorts of so much of the even when Kathy has been murdered. And Sue finds her and screams, and the landlady and her, I don't know, husband, her guest, her friend, whoever, are downstairs, and he puts the landlady in front of him going up the stairs. Yeah. There's so many really funny moments in this.
That's the thing that's fun about watching these older ones is I feel like over time their reputation gets softened into schlock or campiness.
Yeah.
But the good ones are really good. There's a reason they stick around.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're pure entertainment to watch. You're maybe not getting anything highfalutin or particularly challenging, but you are going to be entertained while you watch it.
Yeah. I would also recommend checking out the original if you get a chance to. It's, like I said, directed by the guy who did Casablanca. It stars Lionel Atwill, who I know as the inspector from Son of Frankenstein, who is, Young Frankenstein? You ever seen Young Frankenstein?
No,
the Mel Brooks movie?
No.
What the hell's wrong with you? Jesus.
Like I said, I'm gunning to get fired.
Anyway, if you've seen Young Frankenstein, the inspector in that who has the fake arm is based off of Lionel Atwill in Son of Frankenstein. And the lead actress in the original is Fay Wray from King Kong.
Wow.
Yeah. Biggest difference in the two is that Fay Wray plays a reporter who gets fired because she keeps showing up drunk to work. And so she needs to find the next big story to get her job back.
Amazing.
And discovers the whole thing. But it was shot on 2-strip Technicolor, so it's got this weird kind of not quite full color tinting look to it that's pretty interesting.
Cool.
The sets are very expressionistic. It's still in the pocket of the first run of Gothic horror, 35, so it's a couple years after Dracula and Frankenstein. Okay. So it still has a lot of that German expressionism built into the set. So the laboratory at the end, which is in the basement, is like an airplane hangar designed cavern by a German insane person. Yeah. But it's worth checking out if you get a chance. Like I said, it's very, very similar, but it's academically it's a good watch. You have any final thoughts on House of Wax, 1935? Sorry, 53.
Final thoughts. I love Vincent Price.
Yeah.
I think he's a treasure. I think he's amazing in this. This is prime Vincent Price material.
It's so fascinating that he obviously he'd been around, we talked about, but he appears in this movie fully formed as capital V, capital P Vincent Price.
Yes.
Like, this is the same thing you get in all of the classic movies.
But I feel like this was him kind of accidentally discovering what would become his niche.
Yeah.
You know, it's just that serendipitous moment of like, oh, this is where I fit.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that I can do with ease and panache. And it's just so fun. It's such a ridiculous, fun movie. There's amazing set pieces in this with the wax figures and the laboratory workshop at the end with the bubbling cauldron of wax, and she's strapped into the coffin like
bioflesh regenerator.
Yes. Yep. And I don't know. This is like a 90-minute movie, and it's a total delight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And if you want to watch 5 to 7 minutes of paddleball in your face, look no further.
If you have the opportunity to see this in 3 whole dimensions,
please do it.
I would recommend.
Very cool. Yeah, I agree with all that. I think this is a great movie. Do you think it belongs on the list? It's currently what the hell did I say it was?
110?
110.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it belongs on the list.
Yeah.
If for nothing else, then the fact that it is sort of the kickoff of Vincent Price's niche in horror. Mm-hmm. And there's some great gags in this too. There's some great sort of horror movie. What were probably already tropes at the time, but I think this one really helps solidify them. So.
I thought the most effective bit of 3D was when Charles Bronson stands up in front of the camera.
Yes,
that was really good.
Yeah, where he just kind of it feels like he comes out of nowhere and then he just runs at him.
Someone on the special features described it as it feels like he got up out of the seats in the theater.
Yes, it's really well done.
Yeah. And he's we didn't really talk about him at all, but he plays a deaf mute.
Yes.
With a face that looks like it was carved out of wax.
Yes. Yeah. He's obsessed with his own face.
Yeah.
Every face he sculpts turns into his face.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's great. Yeah. Definitely check it out. I do think it deserves to be on the list. It is currently ranked higher than The Shining, if we're using that as our barometer. But I would say 110 feels right, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
In the early 100s.
Yeah, if you told me it was 130, I'd be like, well,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's going to do it for House of Wax. We are going to use our wild card spot for our next movie because I think in order to fully talk about the remake of House of Wax, we also need to talk about this next movie, which is a movie called Tourist Trap.
Okay.
Which I'm very excited about because I've finally figured out a reason to do this movie.
Other than just a wild card.
Yeah. It's one of those ones where I was like, well, it's good, but there's so many other things. But this one actually it's contextually relevant now.
Perfect.
So that's going to be the next thing we do.
Nice.
Thank you guys for listening. If you want to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/thepensky-file, where you can follow us on our trip down the road of remakes and reboots.
Yes.
And catch up with our coverage of the Halloween franchise we did last year, or any of the other things we've done previously. Is this our 5th one?
I think so.
Woof.
There's a lot of content
Yeah.
from us on the Patreon.
Yeah.
So.
For the low, low price. I actually don't know how much it costs. I don't handle that part. I don't think it's expensive, though. Anyway, thank you guys for listening.
This makes us seem like out of touch rich people.
Sure.
What does a loaf of bread cost these days? $10?
Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Clyde.
We'll see you next time.
Happy New Year, everyone.